So what we want to do is to have a think about this topic of integration between organizations in several different segments. And first of all, Roman is going to share a bit about the context. What is the context of contract and sponsor organizations and the general issues from the point of view of one of the sponsor organizations? And then Alexander will say a bit about the problem statement coming from the perspective of a contract organization. Marcos then starts to think, well, if we're working together, what is the scope of all those touch points? And he's also then going to talk about the benefits that we're seeking together for the industry from doing something to improve the integration between our kinds of organizations and make it more digital. Getting a little bit onto the how, Michelle will then talk about some patterns of integration, explaining some of the broad patterns that we see today and how we want to move those forwards towards digital maturity. David Brick then talks about some of the principles for when we are doing that kind of integration. It's not just tech, there are some other things to consider. And then Chris, as the final segment, talking about the layers of alignment between our organizations that allow us to actually make this work in practice. So during this session, I'm hoping that you will start to understand some of the limitations of current integration approaches, because these guys will tell you stories of what's actually happening. It's not just reading the slides or reading the document. You'll hear some stories here. So listen out for that. And hoping you'll be able to visualize a big picture for integration that covers quality, supply chain, manufacturing, and tech transfer, and be inspired by those benefits. So just listen out for the passion that these guys have for this topic. That doesn't just come from thinking about it in the abstract. This comes from real experience. And, you know, we all need to chew over those principles and try and work out how can we make this work together and see how to align our organizations so that future integrations will be easier and more effective. First up, to set the scene and give us some context, and he's going to tell us about the context of this topic from the point of view of a sponsor organization. Roman Havrilek.
Hi, my name is Roman Vriliak, and I work for the Pfizer Corporation as the digital leader supporting our external supply organization. I'd like to set the stage for today's vision presentation. Today, we as sponsor organizations are working more deeply with contract manufacturing organizations, which are becoming strategic partners. The same applies the other way around as contract manufacturers become more deeply engaged with multiple sponsors. In BioPhorum, we had representation from both multiple sponsor and contract manufacturing organizations. When we first came together, our problem statement seemed like a simple one. How do we digitally interact with partners outside of our respective organizations? After all, we are pretty good at digitally connecting with our internal stakeholders. So shouldn't it be a simple matter to extend this model to our outside partners? We quickly came to realize the unique challenges in this space that didn't have simple answers. Today, we use many words to describe interaction with external parties. Some examples that I'm sure you're familiar with are data integration, information sharing, posting a file, emailing and chatting, transacting, we contract, we procure, we send signals, and so on. However, the word that best rolls all of these terms together as one idea is the term collaboration. Merriam-Webster defines collaboration as working jointly with others or together, especially in an intellectual endeavor. It is this type of interaction, the intellectual interaction of biopharmaceutical industry stakeholders working together, which is the focus of the DISCO Forum and the vision document we are publishing and sharing with you today. I don't think it's news to anyone on this webinar that the industry landscape is changing. Our supply chains are changing and becoming more and more complex, involving an increasing number of supply and service partners. COVID only served to accelerate this business transformation. I'd like to first define two terms that you will see throughout this presentation: sponsor and contract organizations. Sponsor organizations are organizations that are mainly product-centric. And contract organizations are organizations that focus primarily on delivering services. To keep pace with the rapidly changing and increasingly complex business requirements between sponsor and contract organizations, we as an industry have come together to align on guiding principles to drive a more agile and effective digital ecosystem to support what is being referred to as multi-tier supply chains. These guiding principles will support and perhaps even accelerate industry readiness for the more complex business collaboration models to come. Our goal is increased digital maturity and the interactions between sponsors and contract organizations. The metaphor we've selected for our vision is a bridge between sponsor and contract organizations, a bridge that is well designed, properly engineered, and built once to support movement of product, services, and information today and into the foreseeable future. Some of the attributes of a well-designed bridge include connecting two places transparently and seamlessly in both directions. When we get on a bridge and we head across it, we're almost unaware that we have left the road surface and moved to the bridge and then subsequently off the bridge. A bridge allows all types of vehicles and even pedestrians to cross over it. The analogy to business is allowing the connection of diverse business processes, supply chain, manufacturing, quality, procurement, to name a few, and at different levels of sophistication. Different sized vehicles can move across a bridge. This is equivalent to the ability to support either large, complex collaborations or the simplest of interactions. A bridge enables fast or slow connections. You can have a high-speed train or a pedestrian crossing the bridge at the same time. This is equivalent to supporting information exchange near real time from a piece of manufacturing or process equipment, or sharing a certificate of analysis at the end of a production run. Invest once. Build the bridge between organizations once and then reuse. We need to stop building bridges for every interaction. Future-proof. The ability to flex and support innovations in product and services being produced. An example is the move to personalized medicines. This will have a profound impact on how our supply chains work in the future. The ability to evolve and change as business needs and conditions change. COVID is a great example of the need for agility and responding under constantly changing circumstances. And finally, a poorly designed bridge can and will fail in many ways. These bridges can become your supply chain critical path if not fully considered and well designed. Our approach to producing this vision was a comprehensive one, engaging with 77 representatives from 31 global companies, including stakeholders from manufacturers, service organizations, contract organizations, and technology solution providers. For 2 years, this team met and shared a collective experience. We established the current state of industry. We examined the drivers for change and then synthesized a vision for the future. We also conducted an industry survey to validate our findings and refine as needed. The rest of this presentation will walk you through the journey our team took to produce this vision. You will hear from each team member sharing from the first conversations on what problem we are trying to solve for, through presenting the principles and layers of digital alignment between sponsor and contract organizations. Finally, this vision has something for all audiences. This includes business executives, supply chain leaders, manufacturing specialists, quality SMEs, engineering teams, and digital solution providers. Thank you.
Just before we hand over to Alex's segment, I have a question for you guys, all of you. I'll just put it in the chat here and I'd like you to answer in the chat. And the question, particularly for your sponsor or contract organization, is roughly how many partner organizations do you work with? Is that 1, 10, 15, 100, 200? Let's just get some numbers going in the chat here, just to get a sense from that point that Roman was making, that we're increasingly working with more and more deeply with different organizations. About 5 or so. From an academic point of view, interesting, yes. So we haven't considered academic partnerships in this, have we? So 15 to 20 from another person. Rachel, thank you for that. Whoa, 100, Hannah. Your brain must be exploding. Working with 100 partners. Wow. And John has got 20 to 25. Yeah, like a bit of shock going on there, Hannah. That's in the reactions to your comment there. So if you, oh man, Roman, you must be tearing your hair out. Oh, you have. Anybody else? Got some numbers. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? These are not small numbers for most people. Although depending on the size of your organization, it may be quite different. So Roman's talked a bit about the deceptively simple problem statement and the actual human thing of collaboration that is beneath all of the technical stuff. And that wonderful bridge analogy is what we're trying to build. But first of all, we've got to think a little bit harder with Alex Ulbricht's help about what the problem looks like from the point of view of a CDMO.
Thanks for the introduction. So my name is Alexander Ulbricht. I'm a lead expert for digitalization at BioPhorum. BioPhorum is a contract organization. And I want to explain a little bit about the problems we are facing at the moment, the whole digital integration and data exchange between the sponsors and the contract organization. For example, from our customers and sponsors, we are getting several requirements for the same integration to be done on different ways. Let's say, for example, PO or invoice. We are getting requirements to exchange the PO, for example, in different formats like CXML, like CSV, like IDOC, like ANSI X12 for EDIFACT, and over different kind of protocols. Because of this missing or lack of standards in the area, we have to develop individual interfaces for each of our customers. Because of the size and the availability of IT resources for these integration topics on our side, it's very challenging because it's not competitive with, for example, the resources available in the IT area of our sponsors. So what we are identifying or have identified as well in the past, that some or part of this established interfaces are not robust and not flexible, not really efficient, and of course of these individual requirements, the implementation time needs a lot of resources and takes also a lot of time. What we want to do is a robust, flexible integration, efficient and fast for us, and of course also for our customers and sponsors. Mainly also to reduce the manual and repetitive work on both sides, of course, increase quality and increase the speed of implementation. So what are the main challenges at the moment? So we have identified several topics. The first one is the digital maturity of our sponsors differs very much. So we have identified different personas which have different requirements and possibilities of electronic data exchange. For example, we have on the contract organization side, we have customers identified persona 1 as a small biotech companies, the very small biotech companies. They don't have IT capabilities at all. So that means we have to offer them a solution where they can use and exchange data over a very easy way, for example, over a web portal. The second personas we have identified is a kind of mid-sized companies like mid-sized biotech. They have already IT departments, and they have also partly implemented integration solutions where they can exchange data, not all kind of data, but part data, kind of data with very poor possibilities like flat files over protocols like SFTP to uploading something to SFTP server. And then the third persona, which we have as customers and also identified, is the big pharma and biotech companies. They have a lot of variations of possibilities to exchange data. They have the newest solutions in place. They have a big team, integration team to integrate their contract organization to the company. So the second topic we have identified as a problem is the missing standard. and also the main the vendor-driven point-to-point solution. So the current established interfaces are standardized by our sponsors, mainly driven by vendor solutions which are in place on the sponsor side. That covers the formats like the IDOC, CXML, CSV, ANSI, and so on, and also the protocols like web service, AS2, HTTPS. So on the contract organization side, we have to support all of these different formats and all of the different protocols. That means for us, it's a very high complexity, a low flexibility, and it ties many resources on our IT experts to implement these individual interfaces to each of our sponsors, because each of them are nearly unique. That means that's a standard from the sponsor, but it's not a global standard. And the third challenge we are facing is the increasing of expectations. So all of this integration started already a couple of years ago, but mainly the supply chain data and interfaces were covered at that time. So we have integrated a lot of PO, invoices, API, goods received, information, ASN, and so on. But since a couple of months, the data exchange expanded and include additional data domains like the quality, the manufacturing, and also tech transfer in the meantime. So against this background, it's more important than ever to define appropriate standards now. Otherwise, it will be almost impossible for the contract organizations to implement the integration in a timely manner. And yeah, that's one of the biggest goals of this work stream in DISCO, and that's why we are sitting together and discussing how we can proceed with that, how we can define the standards and establish it in the industry.
Fantastic, and thank you to Alexander for pre-recording that. I wanted to ask people on the call, particularly those who put big numbers in the chat, do you have a way of categorizing the different companies that you partner with? I think Alexander had small biotech, mid-sized, and large. Have you come up with anything to do that? Oh, we've got Nima coming on. Great stuff. Go ahead, Nima.
Thanks. So we have different categories from CRO to CDMO to CMO and sponsors, right? So, and then this is not like manufacturing data that could be like in the QMS. Sometimes the lab and like exploratory discovery material that's in the CRO, that's gonna get missed during this kind of knowledge management. And so we have different solutions for how you can have some lab data that would be useful for like manufacturing later on. What is like the nature, the frequency, the type of data is all different.
Okay, so you're characterizing them by the types of data and the role that they play, and then how the data is going to be used. Very good. Anybody else like to comment on how you categorize the different participants in your partner network? Well, let me ask a more general question using another quiz question, if you like, on the chat. And this is thinking ahead to our next segment. And the question I have for you is, what areas of process integration between sponsors and contract organizations most interest you? Oh, some of you are going to want to tick them all, I know, but if you could tick the one that's perhaps top of your list at the moment or most urgent for you at the moment, or the one that you're most focused on, that would be useful. And then we'll start to see a pattern of who's interested in what in this audience that we've got here. So thank you for responding. I'm sure most of you can see some responses as you respond. So it's a sort of a neck and neck race at the minute between quality and manufacturing. Nobody has said supply chain is their top priority yet. It might be because most people have already done some stuff in supply chain. That's certainly what we came across. But there are a few things people want to do a bit more of, as you will hear as the next segment comes on. So this is very interesting indeed, just seeing that the top priorities are in a slightly different order from what we got in our original survey. So hold that thought if you have one, and be prepared if you want to type in a comment about that, or to talk after the next segment from Marcos, which is talking about the scope.
So now we change from the contract organization to the sponsor. So with that, I will cover this section of the scope, or what is the data that we are interested on. And we have asked many companies on prioritizing which type of data you are interested on. And I very much agree with this order, actually. Quality, as you can see, has the most responses as a first choice. And from a Novo Nordisk perspective, I very much agree to that. That's what we are here. That's what we require to be able to sell our products to our patients. So this is the cornerstone of what we do. Then, of course, supply chain. And it's true, as it was mentioned already by Alex, that at the end of the day, there has been some progress in this area, but still there is more to do. And that's why, as you can see, many have highlighted this as a second priority, something that is still some work to do. And of course, this is related to the disruptions that we all have faced during the last years that are still latent, and hopefully we can optimize those through better integrations going forward. Then the manufacturing part as a third item. As you can see, yeah, that's the result of the survey, actually. And here we are talking about, and we will look into details in with what type of data, but we are talking about our production status as an example. This might not be the first priority, but still it would be definitely beneficial for both organizations. And last but not least is the tech transfer. And this is not I would say, the lowest priority because it's not critical. It's a bit different type of data that we are exchanging. Here we are talking about transferring knowledge, and that's not as intuitive of us changing a PO. So it's super critical. It has different requirements, and we as an industry, it's probably the one that we see the most challenging to solve, but still quite important, I would say. So if we double click in what type of data we are talking about, what type of information we are interested on. First, going back to quality, I would like to highlight, and I will focus, at the end, I would say that all of those are relevant from my point of view to Novo Nordisk, but I would put an example that is something that we see more often every day. Today we have RPAs. Everyone is looking into RPAs, how to extract data from a piece of document, how to upload it somewhere else. That, to be very honest, it requires quite a long time. There is some software development, and then there is a validation part of it, especially if we are talking about quality. However, sometimes going in that direction just brings more issues than what it solves, because at the end of the day, that requires more maintenance, while we are not really looking at what it could really solve the issue by just integrating, by having, for instance, a data pipeline between both companies. So that could be one example of not really optimizing, but sometimes overcomplicating instead of looking at the root cause about how we can solve this issue. That could be one of the examples. In general, in Novo Nordisk, we are focusing in this as the primary objective. Deviations, for instance, could be something that is a low-hanging fruit, and that's probably the area where we would like to start to get data. But of course, the end of the day would be that our people releasing, especially the batches, will get the data not instant, because that's probably not the requirement, but quite fast from their corporate system of the contract manufacturing organization in our corporate system of the sponsor. And in that way, releasing the batch much faster than what we are doing today. Then if we move over to supply chain, of course, there has been a lot of progress in this area. Purchase orders, for instance, and invoicing, that's already existing for most of the companies. However, I would like to point out the first point, the planning and forecasting, because this is really down to the collaboration. This is really down to the trust between both companies and synchronizing and aligning that collaboration so the delivery takes place when it is basically expected. I could put an example that I have seen. We are supposed to ship our raw materials to our contract manufacturing organization, and then the contract manufacturing organization, of course, will do whatever it's required and ship back to us. At the end of the day, it's really difficult for them to know when they need to start production if they don't have the transparency on when our raw materials are arriving to them. And of course, on the other side of the supply chain, we have no visibility into when that batch will be transferred. Of course, we have the information, emails and the different sources, but it's not I would say, a live or a bridge as we are discussing here today. So that's another example of supply chain potential improvement, having more visibility as well in the planning and forecasting in the long term, so both parties can align and plan better what is coming and basically the business alignment in the future. Then in terms of manufacturing, another example that I can give is that for some specific contract manufacturing organizations, we are recording the time and we are requesting the time for when that specific batch will be started and when it will be released or what is the current status. We are doing that today. And of course, it's a manual process where our partner needs to type in the data manually. Of course, as you can imagine, this is far from optimal. And with this, you could say, doesn't mean that we require all of this information. It means that we might require it for some specific critical contract manufacturing organization. And I think that's really important to differentiate. We might have different levels of alignment. We might have different levels of integration, but at the end of the day, we have different, for instance, for one of our contract manufacturing organizations, we might have one batch per year. Do we need such a strong integration? Probably not. But if we are talking about our business critical partners, then probably we do. So that's also something that we need to be pragmatic and in terms of what data we prioritize and what partners we prioritize these integrations. And last but not least, and in this area, I'm not definitely the expert, but tech transfer. And this is really back to the point, it's a knowledge transfer. There are different confidentiality levels in this integration. This makes it harder to find out what is the best setup. And as an industry, this should be in focus, but today is probably the most challenging area, as I have mentioned earlier.
Fantastic, thank you, Marcos. And I can see that you're on screen there as well. It's a little while since we recorded that. Are your priorities still the same?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Despite the results of that we can see in the poll, yes, deviations, quality, that's our main goal right now.
Yeah, and of course that has helped to shape our program, our DISCO program, in choosing which areas to focus on, two of which are quality certificates and the deviations. And we've just got some teams starting on deviations. We've done a bit of work on the certificates of analysis. So this industry view helps us not to be isolated in thinking this is just my problem, but to know that others are thinking the same, and we're not the only people asking for this kinds of digitization. And the sheer number of those integration points that you showed reveals that this is a strategic issue and it needs a strategic approach. Yes, we need to work on the individual touch points, but we also need a framework, a playbook, a way of thinking that draws all this together. And we need to justify that this needs to be done properly for all our integration points, not just piecemeal. Now, the key question, though, is if it is very expensive, or even if you're looking at a solution which makes that slightly easier, you still have to justify to senior management, how are we going to get this funded to get this done? And so the next segment, again, by Marcos, because of a jury service outage, actually, somebody wasn't able to join us when we were doing the pre-records, is to talk about that very issue of benefits. This has got to be something which is valuable to the business. So let's just play Marcos' segment about the benefits of better digital integration.
First of all, my name is Marcos, and I'm heading up the analytics and digitalization department in Novo Nordisk, which takes care of all our external production. With that, we can continue to the benefit section. Of course, at the end of the day, what we are trying to achieve is having better integration between both partners. The goal, obviously, is to have better data and more, you could say, visibility into that data. When I'm asked about what is the goal here, I would say the goal is to achieve the same visibility externally as we have of our internal production. Is it feasible? Probably not. But to be honest, if we don't get to 100%, but we get to 80%, that will be already a big success. Today, our level is quite limited. So we have to really set up the bar high and see how far we get. And I think that's a call for action to all the industry to look at it together, try to find those standards that we are mentioning today. So at the end, some of the benefits, visibility, this will increase trust, which I have mentioned already before, trust. That's for me a key part in the collaboration. Then it's about the optimization, it's about compliance. For instance, something that we can for sure, and we are doing today, is supporting our partners to solve some of the issues that they might have during production. If we have more transparency into what is happening, then we can jump in, predict that issue, and help them to solve it quicker. The more we are, the more we can help. Another point is the new technologies, and there is mentioned AI. As an example, supply chain twins. That's a really hot topic these days. But if we don't have the data, what are we going to do without that? I mean, that's the key. And we don't have that data today. So we can talk about the most advanced technologies in the world that if at the end we are providing data manually, or if we don't have the data, then we will not get anywhere. And at the end, it's all about having better capacity plannings. That's really critical. We need to have the capacity required when we need it to be able to deliver on time. And that visibility, it's quite difficult as an industry to get from both sides. Then it's about increasing efficiency. It's back to productivity. It's back about reducing human errors. I mentioned earlier that to get our production status, someone needs to type the information in an Excel. The amount of errors that can get out of that, you can imagine it. And the amount of extra workload that we are putting in our partners, in our contract manufacturing organizations, is quite high. And I think this is really important to highlight. We can request all types of data to our contract manufacturers. However, it needs to be a double relationship. They need to also benefit out of it. And we do believe that both partners can benefit. For instance, back to the forecast and the planning. So definitely it needs to be a collaboration. It will not work, as Alex mentioned, that everyone, all of the contract manufacturers, all of the sponsors go to our contract manufacturing organizations and we ask for one specific integration for us. It will just not work. Another opportunity would be to have easy integration. So just standard integrations, I wouldn't say plug and play, but the closest to that, and then go and have those as part of our assessment process. When we go and find a new partner, then we want to fit them in one of these models. So that could be definitely an opportunity. And then the last one is support and enhance and personalized products. This is really out of my field, but of course, for some other pharma industry, this can be really beneficial to increase the speed. And I think that's really reflected in the next slide, where we have a summary of all the different aspects, of all the different outcomes or benefits that we are expecting out of this integration. I would start by the last one. As you can see, this is not driven by cost. And this is reflecting the point of view of Novo Nordisk, I would say. But this is not only Novo Nordisk, this is the industry. We don't think this is the primary driver. The primary driver is quality first, it's speed, and it's flexibility. By having a better view into the data, by having the early detection, we can improve the quality. We can release those batches faster. We can, of course, help the supplier to solve those issues. And then we can also be more flexible. If they are aware of when we need certain batch or what is our forecast in the long term, then they can allocate their capacity better. So it's speed, flexibility, and it's not so much cost. But of course, there is an intrinsic benefit of cost. I have mentioned the amount of hours that we spend internally and also externally typing manual data, that it should just be flowing between both organizations. It should be just flowing in that bridge that Roman was describing before. So with that, and I hope some of the benefits highlighted here do make sense to all of you. Thank you.
And thank you, Marcos, for explaining that. So, you know, we've been looking a lot at the why here, haven't we? And that's the why in terms of the business context and the opportunity from Roman, the challenges that Alexander expressed, the benefits of doing something about it. The benefits for all parties have to be aligned for this to happen. That's all why should we do this, which is really important that we get that clear. Now we need to move on in our thinking and think about what it should look like. So it's why, what, and how is the basic structure. And let me ask you the question first in the chat. What would a good integration look like between organizations? And let's see if you are able to get your answer in before I can get the questions out, because I'm a bit behind. I should have had that one prepared. What would a good integration look like between organizations? Okay, it's cheating just to have one word, Roman, but I'll accept it anyway. Invisible, that's fine. A good integration between organizations should be invisible. What else can we say about a good integration between organizations? Okay, everyone's going for invisible because it's a short word, but I'll give you a few more seconds just for people to be able to type and get their comments showing there. End user focused. Now that's a really interesting comment. Thank you, John. Sorry, Daniel. And John needs it to be secure and collaborative. Two big themes. Santul says it should be flexible and case-specific data integration platform that ensures a validated data transfer from source to destination. So that validation is key for Santul. That is about getting it so it can work in a GXP environment, so we can make decisions on that data without having to be human checked in between. Rachel wants it to be easily managed and scalable. So the question, easy for updates in schedules, adding new products. So that might mean about tech transfer, does it, Michelle? Communicating potential quality issues quickly. Yes, so quality events certainly are things that we want to communicate about. We've talked about deviations, haven't we? And there's also complaints and other types of quality events. Marcos is saying trustable, flexible, robust, scalable, need-driven. And Marius wants it based on a technology standard, scalable across multiple CMOs and sponsors. Yeah, you don't want to do it a different one for every different partner, do you? And it wants it to be vendor agnostic and affordable. So that vendor agnosticism is about the standards again. Cecilia needs it to be reliable and trusted. And Amanda needs it to be transparent, where intentions are understood and defined. And Nima is going for traceable, flexible, deployable between many sites with different IT capabilities. There's that theme again that Alexander came up with, isn't it? It's that we are partnering with organizations at different levels of digital maturity. So let's just take that as a cue to look at the next segment from Michelle, which is thinking about patterns of integration. How are we going to do this? What does it look like in practice today? And where are we going with it in the future? So let's hear that segment now.
As you know, the digital plant maturity model has been in use for a while now. This was developed by the BioPhorum IT group, and we have been using it as an organization with our customers. But one thing that's lacking in that model is integration between a sponsor and a contract manufacturing organization. So that's what we're going to talk about here and look at the patterns of maturity with digital integration between sponsors and contract organizations. As you can see on this slide, we have designated 5 levels, with the first level being pre-digital, and then moving on from there, manual extraction, auto ingestion, and near real time to describe that level of integration between the sponsor and contract organization. So in the pre-digital stage of integration, the communication is often by paper or phone in order to communicate quality results or order information or materials information. I kind of lived through that in my days at Merck when I was working with a contract manufacturing organization. You know, we often faxed things, and unfortunately, there are still a lot of organizations that still have this paper or phone world where they have to communicate that way. In some cases, they might have a system that the other party can access to enter that information, but they have to go online, use Citrix to get into the other person's system and to be able to enter that information, whether it's material information or quality results or whatever. In the manual extract stage, the pattern is to be able to at least download information from one party to another, whether it's by email or manually importing the information. So perhaps you get a file that has to be exported from the sponsor that has information on all the orders that you would like the contract organization to process. And then the contract organization will get that information and have to download that into their system. And then likewise, the contract organization may have to send certain pieces of information back to the sponsor, such as a certificate for the quality of the product, so C of A, that might need to be sent to the sponsor organization, and they would download their information or export it over by email in a file, like a PDF file, for example. Now, the pattern in the auto extract stage is where you can actually extract the files and send them, but you still have to manually import them. So there's an auto extract on each side of both the sponsor and the contract organization, where they can get the information that's relevant, such as the C of A or material information or quality results, and then be able to extract that and send that to the other party. And in this case, there could be some tools to kind of help assist with that import and export. So it's really just a matter of the person getting the files and then clicking a button to make it happen. So the pattern in the auto ingest stage is about auto extracting the data and then sending it and auto ingesting that data. So for example, you might want to send your critical quality attribute information from the contract organization to the sponsor, or deviation data. And when you do that and you auto ingest or auto extract and ingest the data, you can do that on an iPaaS type platform or an integration platform as a service, so that it's a standard platform with all the security bells and whistles also associated with that. And then another mechanism for doing that is actually doing it in a proprietary way, proprietary messages between the system from the same vendor, or if it's from a different vendor, you then now have to have integration capabilities in order to translate that data so that it can be ingested. But you can still do that as an automatic extraction and ingestion. And now finally, in pattern 5, it's in some ways similar to pattern 4, but now you're connecting and interacting in near real time. So when I need the data, I can request it and receive it. So if I, for example, want to check on the inventory level at my contract organization in order to consider whether if I have some increased demand, if I want to consider scheduling some new lots, some additional capacity with the contract organization, I can in real time go ahead and look and see if they have the right level of inventory for us to be able to schedule that as a sponsor organization. There are a couple different ways to do that. As you can see in the top, you have a system actually in each of the sponsor and the contract organization that's actually used for sending, receiving, and interacting and getting that data. Or the other option at the bottom of the slide is to use a common cloud service. Now, of course, with the common cloud service, that makes all the data management and access very interesting, and there's a lot of levels of security and system administration to make sure that the right people have access to the right data and that they don't have access to the data that they should not see. So as David mentioned earlier, we did a survey with the BioPhorum members and asked what patterns they see in use today. And this was specifically regarding quality. And as you can see, most folks are in the pre-digital manual extract stage. You have some in use in the auto extract and very little in auto ingest and near real time. And then as we asked the same folks what their realistic aspirations were for the future regarding several of the dimensions of the sponsor, contract organization, communication, you can see that the main aspiration in most areas is this auto ingest capability, whereas in some cases for supply chain and manufacturing, you could see near real time as an aspiration. And then finally, in the tech transfer state, I was a little surprised to see near real time as even being a response from some folks. However, I guess if you think about that in conjunction with flexible manufacturing and being able to transfer the parameters for a given batch very easily into your execution systems, that would make a sense there. So in summary from the survey, we can see that most folks are today in pre-digital and manual extract stage, and their aspirations for the future are to get to the auto ingest stage for most things, and ultimately to near real time as an aspiration for some areas. Again, it's going to depend on the particular type of data and how you want to integrate with you between the sponsor and the contract organization.
Fantastic. So thank you, Michelle. Michelle's with us on the call today, but I wanted to ask you in the chat just to ask yourselves of those patterns, and I put the slide on screen again. Which of those patterns do you see today in practice? Do you echo what Michelle was summarizing at the end in that segment, or do you see us a little further on, or just a little earlier than that? So what I'm imagining you might put in the chat is 1, 2, 3 or something like that as to what you see in practice today, whether you see pre-digital, manual extract, automatic extraction, that kind of stuff. So let's have some answers coming through today. So Hannah is saying mostly manual extract, and Hannah had 100 organizations. Oh, wow. Michael too. So lots of number 2, manual extracting, downloading email and manually importing. Well, I think we're getting a lot of 2s here. Either that or everybody's keyboard's stuck. The same number.
It's a tough world to live in number 2, let me tell you.
Yeah.
That's why this team is, I think that's why this group, this disco is really important.
Yeah, so we're all wanting to get a little bit higher, but we are all going to need to deal with people at a level 2 of digital maturity. And I suppose that that is the challenge, isn't it? To be able to move forward to the future world while still supporting the other 99 of Hannah's organizations who are still at the manual stage. So we've talked about the business problem, the scope, the benefits of a better approach, and some of the patterns of digital maturity. I did ask in the chat what good integration looks like, and I think it may have stolen a little bit of David Brick's thunder. But David, we'll play your segment, and we'll see if the principles you came up with align with what went on in the chat.
I'm David Brick. I'm in the product strategy team at IDBS, and my background is in statistics, but I've spent most of my career building products to provide domain experts with aggregated data and structured data for analysis. And we've actually built a product to support data access and collaboration between CMOs and sponsors. So this group was really of particular interest to me, both for accessing, sharing, and managing data, and for providing purpose-built applications to use it. So Roman started off by explaining our vision, the goal of increased digital maturity in the interactions between sponsors and contract organizations. But what are the principles for designing and building that vision? First off, we must build something. Anything we build must work with existing systems, both for the sponsor and the CMO. As we just heard, there's things that are out there already, and if a partner enacts requirements or constraints that change work processes, that relationship really becomes a one-off model with more expense and slower response. So we want to make sure we work with existing systems and existing environments. Further, both the CMO and the sponsor are working with other companies, and not all those companies are going to be at the same digital maturity level. So we need a solution that scales and works across multiple levels there. We need an effective process for data transfer, not just automating emails or sending PDFs, but something that makes it easy to gather and send and easy to receive, ingest, and use the data. Next, we need to focus on what data is needed and will be used. I've worked on a project years ago that involved configuration and validation of 9,000 parameters across 3 processes. And I seriously doubt that even a quarter of those were ever actually used for any analytic or reporting purpose. You know, every parameter takes time for configuration and verification, so we have to focus on the useful data. And thinking of the verification, we also need to make sure that data that's intended to be used for GXP purposes maintains that GXP status while it's in transit. And then we need to align on timing. I might be able to send real-time data to the sponsor, but if they're not going to use it in real time, I've wasted a lot of time and effort setting that up and getting it going when I could have done something a little smaller. Ultimately, data and knowledge sharing go a long way to building trust between the organizations and establishing a strong working relationship that can grow. Keep in mind that trust goes beyond just sharing. Partners must also trust each other with regards to how the data will be used. If the data are used outside the intended purpose, bad assumptions can break down trust. For example, if data is shared before it is approved to be more timely, the receiver should not overreact if values need to be changed following the approval process. And once trust is established, it still must be maintained. Security and transparency are critical to that, and they tie into a joint responsibility for data governance. Both partners must work together to ensure data is managed and used responsibly, and that changes are planned and communicated effectively. The contract between the organizations should include commitments from both partners and to work together on data governance. And of course, nothing ever changes, right? Now, the mechanisms built to share data must be agile and extensible to support new needs and new learnings over time within a process, and to support new processes and new modalities as the science moves forward. That science brings me to the users of the data. This all stands on a foundation of real-world physical, chemical, or biological processes. We need to make sure the data maintains its process context and is usable by the scientists and engineers who focus on those processes. In general, no one would be surprised to find a simple correlation between volume and mass, but the process context is critical for the process experts to find actual meaningful relationships for quality teams to monitor and report trends and exceptions. The understanding developed from that analysis and reporting is what enables advancement to the predictive and adaptive maturity models. So our data models need to reflect the real world, and it's all about that structure. If you don't structure it well, it gets messy and hard to use for advanced purposes. Our approach must include the metadata to define the process and must contextualize where the data fits in that process model as part of our vision.
Thank you, David, for that. And as we've been talking about the why and the what, you came up with a lot of ideas. And David has described some of the principles. Michelle has described some of the patterns that we can see. We want to then think about, well, if you're actually going to do this with another organization, we're going to need to align with that organization. And you need to think about, well, there are different layers of alignment, really, and that's what Chris is going to talk about in this next segment.
So I'm Chris Demers. I am the global lead for plant data analytics at Catalent Pharma Solutions. So I look after all things related to plant data. So this is a personal subject for mine, something that I deal with on a daily basis. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the layers of alignment. How are we actually going to get to the the nuts and bolts of exchanging data information between contract organizations such as ourselves and our sponsors, and the complexities that are inherent within. Really, the first thing that we kind of have to align on is we go into an agreement of what types of data do we need to exchange? Process data, quality data, supply chain data. That's an agreement that we can reach early on in our discussion, and then we can really dive into really how are we going to exchange this data. So my background is mostly on the process side, so I'm familiar with exchanging the idea of exchanging maybe equipment data, unit operation data in real time or as near real time as possible. But the challenges for a CDMO is a lot of our sponsors will have numerous systems, and we can't really accommodate all of the different systems, and nor could a sponsor who has lots of CDMOs. And so coming to some standard structure by which we can exchange all this information is really critical to achieving our goals here. Once we sort of agree upon what we want to exchange, there's a number of different layers that fall out from that. So at the core, as I mentioned, is a structure. Are we going to harmonize how we structure our data at both the sponsor and the contract organization level? Maybe that's a standard lab data structure like animal or B2MML. Maybe it's ISA 95. On top of that data structure is some sort of a container. How are we going to wrap this data? Are we going to have it in PDFs and then parse that data out? Ideally, you want something a little more easily parsable, like a CSV or an XML, something that can easily be obtained on either side, sponsor or contract organization. And lastly, there's a number of different ways we can transport this information. Maybe it's just a file drop. And this goes back to our different levels of maturity. For some sponsors or for some customers of ours, maybe that's the best way of transporting data and information is just by dropping it off in a secure file location, and then they can just pick it up using any number of tools. Or maybe they want an even more integrated, if you're maybe have a more mature system for sending and receiving information. Maybe you want a direct connection into our systems. Maybe that's via MQTT or some sort of REST API where we can directly pull it into our system. I know, speaking certainly from the Catalent perspective, we are pushing heavily internally harmonizing on MQTT. It allows us to do hub and spoke architectures, both at the plant floor and beyond. And it allows our clients to then subscribe to their data. And we can securely and efficiently exchange data, certainly process data through MQTT. So as a work stream, what we're not suggesting to do is to modify our operational systems. But what we are looking to align on is our systems for sending and receiving information, which will map to a data structure, wrap that data in some sort of a container, and then transport that data in a secure manner between sponsors and contract organizations. What we're really focusing on is what tools are out there, what technologies can we use that will allow us to, no matter what systems we're using, be able to freely exchange this information, be it a multi-enterprise supply chain network tool, maybe it's an MQTT broker, maybe it's a data lake. I know for one that data lakes have the ability to basically to share data securely in real time. And that's something that as a CDMO we're acutely aware of, is how do we share data without sharing all of our customer data? It needs to be securely exchanged for just that particular customer. And it's abundantly clear through conversations, extensive conversations with the DISCO workstream and just in the industry in general, that this capability of exchanging data information in real time or as near real time as possible is not only becoming an expectation, but a requirement. And I think it is our duty as an industry to achieve this goal in order to get these drugs that we are collaboratively developing and delivering to patients as quickly and with as high quality as possible. And I think that this type of alignment, this type of data exchange is key to achieving that goal.